Hello, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are presented by Breda Pest Management. We're happy to have you with us, no matter how you might be joining us today on what is National Signing Day, although admittedly this National Signing Day certainly has a very different vibe than some National Signing Days would have in the past. Georgia had its eyes on a big prospect for the class of 2023. Has that sort of fizzled away? We'll talk about that here in a moment, about what is kind of going on there in that particular situation, although Georgia fans still hoping for good news today, and we'll talk about that here too. There's kind of a mysterious third candidate out there as well for Georgia when it comes to recruiting. We'll deal with some of that. New information about the Todd Monken situation. We'll talk about that. We'll try to guess when we might get some sort of resolution one way or another on this, and so we'll cover all of that. There's also, and it seems like we do this every single day now, but there's relatively interesting news coming out of Alabama too, so we're going to get to some of that on today's program there as well. Georgia fans having a good time watching Alabama fumbling and flailing around and trying to hire its coordinators. So we'll have some good fun with all of that today there as well. Also a great former Dog, in a roundabout way, maybe giving some advice to what could be a future Dog about just how hard this really is here at this level. So we're going to cover all of those bases here today. We are so happy to have you with us on National Signing Day. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Breda Pest Management, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Breda Pest Management, the official pest control of UGA Athletics.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
It is National Signing Day. You already know that National Signing Day doesn't quite feel the way that it used to feel. I've told our video audience, and I'll say this, and you probably heard me even say this before, that if I was like control of the sport, if I was the all-powerful being that ruled college football, we would have one signing day. It would be in February like God intended. You know, I'm a little bit sensitive to the idea of back in my day, things were so much better. But I do believe that college football recruiting was better when it was just a February signing day. Frankly, I don't like early signing period encroaching on Christmas. I just think that's a little bit gross. I mean, can we have Christmas, please? We've already got, listen, thankful for the college football playoff and the fact that Georgia is a regular part of that here these days. But, the idea that the early signing period essentially tries to engulf Christmas, I've never really loved that. There are some people that like to move the early period up sooner, maybe make it before the start of the season in August, something like that. I'm not quite so sure that's necessarily better, but some folks seem to like that. But either way, it is National Signing Day. National Signing Day doesn't quite feel like it once felt like, but nonetheless, there are a lot of eyes of Georgia fans on what's going to play out here today. And for quite some time, I think the name to know for Georgia fans has been the five-star tight end Duce Robinson. I got to tell you, I think that Robinson really is a dazzling prospect. And this is one of those things where over the course of years, you get a little bit of, I hate to say it this way because it makes it sound like we're all spoiled, and maybe to a degree we are, but you get a little bit of five-star fatigue where it's like, we're always talking about some big name that Georgia's going to add, and they have a tendency to sort of all kind of just sort of run together a little bit, and taking time to appreciate the individual value of each one of these players is frankly something we maybe don't quite stop and do as much as we should. But when a guy like Robinson sort of has the stage to himself, I think you are left to kind of contemplate exactly what a guy like that is as a player, maybe more so than the group of guys that make their decision in December. And when you watch a guy like Robinson, you realize, wow, it's very easy to sort of throw out there for a tight end, oh, this is the next Brock Bowers or something along those lines. But when you look at what makes Robinson special, first of all, he comes from the West Coast part of the country, so that obviously I think lends itself to a little bit of a Bowers comparison. But the sort of athletic style of tight end that could also be a wide receiver, that's what Bowers is, and it really feels like that's what Robinson could be too. So there is a lot of reason that Robinson has gotten the attention that he's gotten coming into this National Signing Day. But as we've gotten closer and closer and closer to the day, things have seemingly gotten less and less certain with Robinson and the decision that he'll make, whether he'll choose Georgia, whether he'll choose a different school, whether he'll make a choice at all. I will invite you, if you're kind of waking up this morning and listening to our show, go to DawgNation.com, please. Jeff Sintel had a very thorough story, first-person account of Robinson in his own words about what he is kind kind of considering and how he's thinking ahead of what's supposed to be National Signing Day and the very real possibility that Robinson doesn't make any kind of decision at all. I'm going to give you a little bit from the story from Jeff Sintel, but I really think that you owe it to yourself to read the full story because it's a really, as I said, it's a pretty deep dive into what's going on with kind of the man of the hour for Georgia here during this, particular, kind of National Signing Day. Some interesting stuff with Robinson. I guess if there's really only one takeaway here, the overwhelming likelihood is that Robinson's not going to make any kind of choice today. So not going to sign any kind of letter of intent the way that maybe Georgia fans hoped that he once would. Let me show you this on the screen here. Here's a quote from Duce Robinson about, kind of why it is that it seems like the likelihood of him signing today is somewhat fizzling. This is from Jeff Sintel's story, DawgNation.com last night. Robinson saying, I guess the only thing to say is that we just don't know yet. We're still figuring everything out. And, listen, I can understand that. I mean, it's obviously a very big decision, and if you're not sure of what you want to do, well, then, of course, there really is no penalty for waiting necessarily. The schools that are involved with him, it seems like it's a Georgia-USC battle here. Obviously, they're going to kind of wait and be patient for Robinson because of the kind of caliber of prospect that he is. So if you put yourself in the position of Robinson here for a moment, you can certainly understand why waiting might seem wise, and it seems like there's a very good chance today that's exactly what Robinson is going to do. But as far as the actual choice itself goes, it seems like this is more than just a choice between Georgia or, as I said before, a school like USC. There's also here the choice of, hey, do I leave myself kind of open to be drafted come June in the Major League Baseball draft? Do I put a lot of attention on my spring baseball season as a way of maybe climbing up those draft boards, getting a chance to be one of the first 30 picks there? And obviously, many of you are aware that those first-round picks in baseball, if they are willing to sign, have a chance to oftentimes get a very, very lucrative contract out of that, big-time signing bonus out of that. It's certainly easy to imagine that if you're a guy that had the potential of doing that, well, clearly you might be interested in that just because of how much money there possibly is. Now, I've said before, and I don't try to be overly cynical about these kinds of things, but I do have to be honest here. I have a tendency to want to greatly, I guess, downgrade the way in which we talk about football players' baseball ability. I just think that we have a tendency to probably exaggerate sometimes how good of a prospect in baseball the average football prospect is, just because, those of us who kind of travel in the football world don't know that we always fully understand the way in which baseball prospects are fully evaluated. That's not to say that I know for sure that Duce Robinson isn't the next. He's been compared, I guess, to Aaron Judge because he's also kind of a big outfielder. Certainly, I don't have enough expertise to tell you that he's not the next Aaron Judge. But I'm always a little bit skeptical of the idea that a guy like Robinson could be just as much of a prospect in baseball, just as good as baseball, as most of us would say that he obviously is in football. The notion that he's the next Bo Jackson, the next Deion Sanders. I mean, there's a reason why we sort of think of playing football and baseball as a very hard thing to do, because the kinds of names that have come up that have been able to do that are guys like Bo Jackson, are guys like Deion Sanders, some of the greatest athletes of all time. And being really, really good at football is just in and of itself just a really difficult challenge. I don't care how great of an athlete you are. In Robinson's case, he's obviously among the elite athletes anywhere in the world, but it's a pretty full meal to eat just being good at really good at one sport. The idea that you can be both really good at two sports is not necessarily the easiest thing to pull off. Maybe Robinson does indeed pull that off, but that is not an easy thing to do. In fact, yesterday on the show, I had a chance to talk to Jake Fromm. Jake is obviously former quarterback at Georgia, guy that led Georgia to the SEC championship and the college football playoff as a true freshman in 2017. And I asked Jake about, hey, coming into Georgia, you'd also been a good high school player there as well. Was he as touted as a baseball prospect as Robinson is? Maybe possibly not, but he was a good high school baseball player for sure, maybe good enough to play at Georgia at least. How much consideration did Jake give of playing both sports? And I think that Jake, and the way that he talks about the challenge of actually trying to do that, is something to keep in mind, whether you're a former quarterback like Fromm or an elite athlete right now like Duce Robinson. It is just not easy to do both, and Jake Fromm was very candid about that yesterday on the show. Let me let you hear Jake Fromm on that particular topic.
Yeah, it was definitely talked about a lot during the recruiting process. I thought about it a little bit definitely once I got there during the spring, during baseball season. And then football season came around. We played a very long season. Rose Bowl, national championship, and then I never once thought about it again. I'm like, man, this was the longest football season of my entire life. I just want a break. And then, of course, we got back rolling again with all-season programs. So I never once thought about it again, and I was just okay playing football.
It's one of those things where Kirby just sort of lays it out there for you, lets you make that decision for yourself once you realize how much actually goes into all of this.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Chris Smart does a good job of recruiting good guys, and so if guys want to play, hey, go for it, but it's definitely going to be tough.
So listen, I think those are really wise words from Jake Fromm, a guy who's like, hey, when I'm a wide-eyed high school senior and I'm on top of the world, I think I'm going to play both sports at Georgia. I'm going to play football. I'm going to play baseball. We all have a tendency to sort of bite off more than we can chew when we're young because we sort of believe we're invincible. We're capable of doing anything. But after you start 15 football games, or I guess in Fromm's case, he started 14. He played in 15 football games for Georgia, and you're trying to absorb mentally what's required to be a quarterback. You're trying to absorb physically what's going on when you're getting beaten on in all those practices and all those games and everything else. When it's all said and done, Fromm said, I never thought about baseball one time again after that because of just how challenging it all is. Now I'm noticing in our Dog Nation comment section, one of our commenters, Senior Dog 54, says, hey, don't forget Jackie Robinson played 3 sports at UCLA. Robinson actually played 4 sports at UCLA. He played football, baseball, basketball, and he ran track. If you go to Pasadena outside the Rose Bowl, there's actually a really cool statue of Robinson as a football player for UCLA. Kind of a different era, and also Robinson, one of the great athletes of all time there as well. So clearly there have been multi-sport stars, but as Jake Fromm tells you, if you're trying to do this at the SEC level and then also do something else in addition to that, just being a good football player is hard enough. And I think that Fromm's words there are probably pretty wise. And I think that they're probably also relevant to Robinson no matter how great of an athlete he is. So we'll see, how Duce kind of interprets all this moving forward. But I do think Jake Fromm's words there are probably pretty wise. However, let me kind of say it this way. That even if Georgia doesn't get good news with Robinson, and even if there's no news at all involving Duce Robinson here today, there is obviously still a chance for Georgia to be a National Signing Day winner. And I say that with somewhat of an asterisk attached to it because Georgia gets a chance to get a commitment today, not from a class of 2023 prospect, but one of the biggest names in the class of 2024. Ellis Robinson's a top defensive back. This is one of those things where if a guy like that were to choose your school, you'd be happy about it no matter what day it occurred. And if it was later on in the 2024 cycle, you better believe it'd be all kinds of spotlight and attention on this. Just so happens, though, that Ellis Robinson, ready to make his decision on signing day for 2023. In fact, let me show this to you. Obviously, Ellis from out of the IMG Academy program says that he's ready to commit today on ESPN2, somewhere between 1:30 and 2 p.m., inviting everybody to tune in. You better believe they will be. This is one of those recruiting battles that seems like Georgia's in a pretty good position on. And so while, technically we're sort of thinking about 2023 prospects today, it could be that Georgia wins with a really big-time 2024 prospect and Ellis Robinson, and we'll be kind of tuned in somewhere around 1:30, 2 p.m. for all of that to sort of play itself out. So here's kind of the bottom line on all of this, is there could be some good news for Georgia that could come via Ellis Robinson. And even if Duce Robinson doesn't make any kind of announcement today, make any kind of decision today, obviously Georgia's not going to give up in its pursuit of him, and he's not going to become any less important of a name to consider when he ultimately does make his final decision. This is a very good football player. Some say could be a very good baseball player there as well. He has his eyes on both sports, and I guess for him, we'll find out what he decides to do next. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Breda Pest Management. We're happy to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all kinds of video platforms. We just really appreciate you joining us however you kind of get to us there. Radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rev. I had a chance to visit with my friends there at 960 this morning. I'm making a radio appearance, do a little interview with them every Wednesday morning around 8:05, and it was fun to do that today. And, of course, it's fun to be on the radio on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Rev each and every day there as well, the show airing there at noon. And, of course, many of you love to listen to the show via podcast. We appreciate that, whether it's Apple, Spotify, everything else in between. All those great podcast platforms. Just really happy to have you a part of our show today. Big thanks to our friends at Breda Pest Management as well for making it all possible. I'll tell you a quick story. So Unfortunately, this is kind of a sad story, but it kind of leads me to a point I'm trying to make. My grandmother's been in the hospital, and she's been in the hospital, kind of going out towards, Walton County, somewhere like that. And so I've been driving out that way. And like the last couple of nights when I've been driving home after having visited her in the hospital, I drive right by the Breda Pest Management. I had no idea their facility that they're building, super nice, beautiful, large campus. It's really very impressive. I'm very impressed by the Breda Pest Management facility. Had a chance to drive by there a couple times here this week, and so to me, that's an example of what we talk about with Breda Pest Management all the time. You see this very large, gorgeous building. You're reminded that they've been in business taking care of folks since 1975. They got like 125 employees, something like that, and that kind of size, that kind of strength, that kind of access to resources has really made them recognized as a market leader. In fact, they are the official pest control provider of UGA athletics. And let me tell you what that means. It means all those buildings, all those athletic facilities around the Athens campus, Breda Pest Management is protecting all of those from termites and bugs and critters and everything else. And what they do for UGA, they want to do for you as well. Now, this is why this matters for all of you, because let's face it, everything in life seems like it's getting more expensive. And maybe your termite protection, maybe that's getting more expensive there as well. You get that letter in the mail of, cost of services going up. And part of the reason why that happens is because the company that you might be working with is sort of one of these fly-by-night companies that doesn't have big, pretty building like Breda does, or, large, employee base and long time track record of serving clients like Breda Pest Management does. They don't have the resources to leverage for your benefit the way that Breda Pest Management can. But when you make the switch to Breda Pest Management, when you let their strength be an ally for you, all of a sudden you're going to put more money back in your pocket just for making that decision. It's literally like your own NIL deal. So go to BredaPest.com for more on this. It's BREDA, BredaPest.com for a lot more on that today. All right, we're going to catch up with Mike Griffith here coming up. Mike, at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. We'll talk about the Georgia guys who were there for that, exactly what is the Senior Bowl, for people who may not be fully into all of that. We'll also get into some of the Monken stuff with Mike, too. That's really what I'm kind of interested in, having that discussion with him on, and so we'll do that here coming up in just a little bit. Also, let me remind you of this. I said this yesterday. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to make a really fun announcement. Now, I wasn't aware of any of this. I was just kind of told this yesterday. Hey, did you know we're going to do blah, blah, blah? And I said, no, I did not. So now I do, and I guess it's becoming official and getting all squared away. So tomorrow on the show, we're going to make a really fun announcement. It's courtesy of our friends at Kroger, but it's going to be something that I think a lot of you are going to have a lot of interest in. So we'll do this for you tomorrow. So around this space tomorrow, be ready for that. Really fun, big announcement courtesy of our friends at Kroger, which I'm really, really excited about that. So we will get to that then. Before that, though, let's get ready to go around the DawgHouse here for a moment. And I want to talk a little bit about the latest on the Todd Monken situation. As you know, Monken has interviewed reportedly for the Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator job, was interviewing yesterday for the Tampa Bay Bucks offensive coordinator job. We can confirm that interview has taken place. The Bucks making this official. It's amazing to me how much more like open and on the record the NFL teams are compared to the college teams. It's just a really different kind of media atmosphere in terms of the fact that with college football, everything is just as secret as it possibly can be all the time. Whereas in the NFL, it's just not nearly as secretive. The Bucks just came right out and said, yeah, Monken interviewed here. No speculation, no guesswork having to go there on that. In fact, we don't even have a ton of guesswork necessarily about what the subject of this interview likely was, because we now know this breaking just this morning prior to our show starting. Tom Brady has once again retired, but this time it sort of feels like it's the official retirement. This sort of feels like it's the end of the Brady era officially, and it was probably already a fairly strong likelihood that Brady wasn't returning to Tampa, that if he did play in 2023, he would have played somewhere like Las Vegas or maybe his hometown team with the San Francisco 49ers or the Jets, somewhere like that. Likely not coming back to Tampa, but now we know that Brady apparently isn't going to play anywhere at all next year. So I think that gives you a pretty interesting window into what the Monken Tampa interview was probably like yesterday. A lot of time probably spent talking about, okay, what does the post-Tom Brady era look like for the Bucs? And I find myself kind of wanting to reiterate something that I said really on yesterday's show, which is, by appearances, the Tampa situation right now is one of the worst in the NFL. I don't know that Todd Bowles is a long-term answer there at head coach. The Bucs are not a very good team. I guess they win the NFC South, maybe the worst division in all of football. But it doesn't feel like there are a lot of building blocks in place for the future necessarily. And now you're kind of post-Tom Brady there as well. So absence of quarterback, no long-term assurance about your head coach, kind of a diminished roster across the board from a talent standpoint. What I said yesterday I think is worth repeating once again. That if Todd Monken leaves Georgia, which quite possibly is the single best college football situation, given Monken's salary, the talent he has a chance to work with, the obvious success that the Dogs are having on the field, that if you leave the overall best college situation for what might be the overall worst NFL situation, at least among the worst in the NFL in terms of what you'd be stepping into there, then it is clear and it is concise and it is just as unmistakable as possible that Todd Monken just wants to be in the NFL, that you would literally choose any NFL situation over the best college situation. If that's what goes down, then that's all you need to know. Now, it's also a situation here where maybe the Bucs situation is so unattractive, so diminished because of the absence of Brady, the uncertainty about Bowles and everything else, that maybe, it's one of those things where in the right set of circumstances, maybe Todd would want to be in the NFL, but this just doesn't feel like the right set of circumstances. I'm not really quite so sure when we exactly get resolution in all of this, but it's pretty obvious that the interview that Monken had yesterday with Tampa, a lot of that conversation had to be about kind of putting the pieces back together of a post-Tom Brady era in Tampa there. So that would certainly seem to be the conversation. However, let me kind of spin this, though, to kind of a different place here before we move on. I think in light of what's going on with Todd Monken here, clearly showing some interest in the NFL, interviewing in Baltimore, interviewing in Tampa, who knows where else, maybe before it's all said and done. I think in light of all of what's gone on with Monken here, I do think you're reminded of kind of what makes Georgia, Georgia. And this is the kind of thing that I don't believe that fans should miss. I do think that fans should pay pretty close attention on all of this because in the very good story that Jeff Sintel had with Duce Robinson, the 5-star tight end, which posted last night at DawgNation.com, and which you have a chance to read here yourself today, one of the things that came up in that discussion is, well, how do you feel about Todd Monken and the idea that Monken might not be here? Because as it stands right now, we don't really know what Monken is going to do for next year. It's at least a possibility that Todd is no longer here. And so Jeff asking Duce his feelings on that, I think that Duce Robinson gives you an answer that if you're a Georgia fan, I don't think you should miss this. Let me show you this on the screen once again. This is Duce Robinson saying, we love Coach Monken. We love his offense, and we love what he does. But there are a lot of other things to love about Georgia, too. He says whether he decides to stay or he gets a job in the NFL, we love Georgia regardless. Once again, that's 5-star tight end Duce Robinson via DawgNation. Now, let me tell you what I think you should take away from this, is that in the midst of Georgia dealing with what is kind of a challenging situation, you don't want to lose your offensive coordinator. Obviously, you'd love to be able to maintain that coaching continuity if you could. But it's important to note that a guy like Duce Robinson says, hey, I like Todd Monken, but I like Georgia, his word, regardless, whether Monken is here or not. Now, what that leads me to say is that what Georgia has is what I think all college teams aspire to be. Everybody has a team, but not everybody has a program. And what Georgia has built is a program, and a program is bigger than any one name. For instance, a couple of years ago, LSU had best quarterback in the sport. They had Joe Burrow, a record-setting team, wins a national championship. But when Burrow leaves, what's still there at LSU felt like more of a superstar player helping a team more so than actually being a program. Look at Alabama the year after that. You got Steve Sarkisian pushing the buttons as your offensive coordinator. Sarkisian may be about as good as anybody's ever been calling plays the SEC level. The overall stats would certainly suggest that. They average about 50 points per game in the Sarkisian season there in 2020. But when he leaves and goes and becomes Texas coach, what does Alabama still have in the wake of his departure? An offense that doesn't function quite as well. Still a pretty good team, but the program maybe not quite as strong. Think about the NIL stuff we talk about today. A&M has seemingly had a good bit of that. That's how they got the number one recruiting class allegedly a year ago. Miami seems to be leveraging that right now. But you look at the on-field success for those teams that have all of this access to NIL, you don't frankly see them winning a lot of games. They may have some resources, but those resources so far haven't enabled them to build a program. If you're Georgia, I think you take comfort in this. You don't want to lose Todd Monken, and hopefully Georgia won't. If you're a Georgia fan, you're certainly saying that here right now. But even if Monken leaves, what is left over in his wake is still a program. It is a program that's bigger than any one player, any one coach, anything else. It is a program that is likely to survive and thrive no matter which assistant coach decides to come or go or whatever else. And the words of Duce Robinson, I think, stand as a pretty good reminder of all of that. So that's Around the Doghouse here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. By the way, speaking of recruiting, we've got another note to give you later on about a 2023 prospect that Georgia might still be in pursuit of, or maybe it's the absence of a note, which in and of itself is maybe something that's worth paying attention to. So we'll talk about that. There is some crazy drama going on around the Alabama program, so we'll kind of touch on some of that there too. But for now, live from Mobile, Alabama, with a look at what's going on with Todd Monken and what we might expect to happen next, let's talk to Mike Griffith here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We are fancy today. Mike Griffith on video. Got the Senior Bowl backdrop behind him. This is like a real show. This is frankly very, very impressive. So, Mike, glad to have you there from down in Mobile. We'll get into a moment or two about what's going on at the Senior Bowl and how the Georgia guys are performing with all of that. Let me, though, bring you in on what has been the hot topic here all week long, and that is the future of Todd Monken after confirming that he interviewed with the Tampa Bay Bucks, I guess reportedly interviewing the Baltimore Ravens. What do you make of what certainly seems to be interest on Monken's part about returning to the NFL? How do you interpret all of this right now?
Well, the fact that he was at a booster function in Athens instead of down here in Mobile tells me that now it's probably more likely, at the moment, it's more likely that he goes back to Georgia, because everybody who's anybody is here in Mobile. All the coaches, all the GMs, a lot of owners, and a lot of guys that are looking for work, a lot of guys that are interviewed. There's a lot of interviews that are going on here in Mobile right now, this week, with all the personnel here. To me, if Todd Monken was still looking for a job in the NFL, he would be in Mobile right now. But instead, he was at a booster function in Athens last night, and all indications were that he plans on coming back. So, you, I think, spelled out really well the situation in Tampa. Looks like about as unstable of a situation as you could possibly have, quite frankly. And as much as Monken may want to go back to Tampa because he has a home there or whatever, or wants to be in the NFL, the situation he has at Georgia is so good. And honestly, Brandon, talking to the guys today, and I'll write this, I'm throwing it out on DawgNation Daily before I even write it.
Wow. Talking
to the Georgia players here, the confidence in Carson Beck is unbelievable. They like Gunner and they like Brock, but it sure does sound like Carson Beck is the guy that the guys that are leaving think is going to take over. And a lot of these guys have a lot of belief in that. They both, again, the players that we spoke to from Georgia today that are here had a lot of good things to say about Gunner and a lot of good things to say about Brock. But they left little doubt that Carson Beck is likely the guy. And there was a lot of positivity about Carson Beck. And they were just kind of general questions. It was kind of like, how are you doing here at Senior Bowl practice? And, what do you think about some of the off the field distractions? And what do you think about next year? Who has to step up next year? And the first name they mentioned was Carson Beck. So it sounds to me like Beck is doing a good job in the offseason. Talking to sources, Monken at the booster function last night. Lots of smiles, lots of good vibes. So if Monken was seriously pursuing the NFL hard, I think he would be here in Mobile, because this is where those jobs happen. This is where you meet people, you can be seen. He could have easily passed it off as, I want to be here for Kenny McIntosh. He was a versatile guy. I want to help promote him. Like I saw yesterday, Shane Beamer was here with the South Carolina guys. You saw Knoxville, Tennessee head coach Josh Heupel was here yesterday, spoke with him. You see a lot of college, Dabo Sweeney, see a lot of college coaches here. Monken could have done that. He's not here, though. He's back in Athens. To me, that's a really good sign. Okay, so you said a lot. I want to try to unpack a lot of this, including getting to the quarterback topic that you brought up there a moment ago, too, because that sounds really interesting. I said this to Connor yesterday, and I'm curious if you get the same sense of this that I got, which is that, in the month of
sort of like late December through January, we talked to Todd Monken a pretty good bit. I know you interviewed him. I had a chance to interview him. I mean, he was more available during that kind of 5-6 week period than he was any of the time prior to that, just because of the way in which, assistant coaches get handled at a place like Georgia. And what I said on the show is that, you ask Todd all these questions about, kind of how you compare college to the NFL, your situation at Georgia compared to other situations. And like the one thing that Monken's never going to give you is that super like emotional answer, that teary-eyed answer of, oh my gosh, I've never had anything like I've got it here at Georgia. Like nothing's ever felt the way this feels. It's like, that's what Georgia fans want to hear, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I've been waiting my whole life to have a coaching experience like I'm having here at Georgia. And Monken just doesn't really give that to you. He's kind of analytical. He's a little salty. He's just kind of a grizzled veteran. And so I think what has made all this process really interesting is that, one of the famous things you sometimes read in news reports, which is, hey, according to someone familiar with Monken's thinking, or whoever's thinking. Yeah, I don't really know how many people are all that familiar with Monken's thinking necessarily because, he's just one of these guys that just doesn't seem to have a lot of emotion connected to his coaching career. He's pretty matter of fact about the way that he talks about all of this, which to me has made this period kind of interesting in that, I've gone back and listened to a lot of things he said to me or a lot of things he would have said to you, and I don't really know that you get a lot of clues from going back and listening to some of those old interviews because Monken's just not very emotional about this topic, it doesn't seem.
No, I mean, he's rational, and people get nervous when they can't pin you down, Brandon. I know this covering Georgia. Well, people, is Mike a Tennessee fan? Is he an Alabama fan? Well, he went to Michigan State, or is he a Dog fan? I'd like, no, look, this is a job. You're very clear. Brandon Adams is all Dog all the time. We know this. There's no inhibitions about it. Whereas Monken is a guy, if you look at his track record, he doesn't stay anywhere a long time. He hasn't. He is tough, and he's somewhat tough to work with. And that's why you kind of wonder about him and Kirby and, how combustible could that be? I mean, Kirby's not exactly a warm and fuzzy sweetheart either. Now, just imagine if Kirby was coaching another school, he'd probably sound a lot like Todd Monken, right? Mm-hmm. Now, because Kirby's a Georgia Bulldog, you feel it and you get the vibe. But if he was anywhere else, and he's been other places, by the way, Kirby has, he'd be a lot like Monken. And Monken's a guy, Brandon, that's going to look at all the cards on the table and he's going to say, what's best for me? Because he gets it. Because the school, as he said, don't tell me it's a family. If I suck, you're going to fire me. That's his quote. If I suck, you're going to fire me. Don't want to hear about this family environment. And as far as the relationship with Kirby, he said, look, he's my boss. And the minute that I think it's more than that, I'm wrong. And you're right. That is a cold, hard, callous, but very realistic approach. And you're right. Fans don't want to hear that because we have this comfort zone and, Georgia's the greatest place and Sanford Stadium. And why would you ever want to be anywhere else? And you know what? Absolutely. I can vouch for that. I've told you that Athens is the best place. That's why me and you went round and round about why give up a game to Jack's that dump when you could be in Athens for another home game, right? But every school kind of feels that way. Tuscaloosa in Alabama feels that way. Auburn feels that way. Monken just wipes all the BS off the table and says, all right, I'm here to win championships. What's the best situation? I think the money is there, but I think it's secondary. I think he's a competitive. I think he has to go interview just in case. I mean, who knows what's going to happen a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years at Georgia. You don't want to send the NFL the message that, hey, I'm not interested. I'm all cozied in here. No, he's still on the market. I'm going to listen to what you got to say. And at the end of the day, I'm going to make a decision that's best for me. I think right now he's leaning towards coming back to Georgia. But again, I don't know if Baltimore is going to throw $10 million at him or how much Tampa Bay or if money could sway him or if there's another better situation that could still arise. We've seen some new coaching hires. Right now, though, I think Todd is engaged with Georgia. He was at a booster function last night. He was talking a lot about the team, and he loves what he's got coming back.
Interesting stuff. All right, tell me more about these quarterbacks because it sounds like you got a good story coming at DawgNation.com. I'll be looking forward to reading that. Listen, I think this is fun. I mean, obviously, Georgia's got a lot to replace a quarterback because of the success that Stetson Bennett enjoyed. But anytime you have a chance to have three really exciting prospects in a battle like this, I think it's going to make spring practice really entertaining. And the odds are between three names of this caliber, the chances of Georgia having a good quarterback next season, I would say, are pretty good just because of the level of talent that's in this competition. So this is going to be fun over the course of the next few weeks. It sounds like a lot of guys who've seen these, this trio in practice a good bit are kind of speaking out to you a little bit. So This is also fun this time of year to hear what former Georgia players think about what's left at Georgia in their absence now. So I don't want you to give the whole story away because I want people to read your story at DawgNation.com. But what's being said about Carson and these other quarterbacks here right now?
Well, nothing specifically about what they do, Brandon. I think we all have kind of an idea of what each quarterback's strength is. I think Jake Fromm, when we have him on DawgNation Daily, has done an unbelievable job breaking these guys down. I go back to Marlowe's event at the beginning of the year. I thought Jake gave a great breakdown on those quarterbacks in terms of who they were, what they were, and what they offer. And everything I'm hearing is consistent with that. It's more or less about the pecking order. And to me, it was more about the prevalence of hearing Carson's name, right? Just that he is the next guy up. I think that's pretty clear, especially if Monken stays, right? Because what Monken does is it's not like, okay, I'm going to pick my quarterback and then I'm going to design an offense around him. That's not what he does. It's let me take a look at all the personnel and let's see how it makes it work. One of the more interesting discussions I had today was with one of the TCU defenders. And I said, all right, what was it? I know that 65-70, if you play the game 10 times, that's not going to be the score. What went wrong? And he said, Brock Bowers. He said, you're trying to scheme for this guy. You know that they're going to move him around. And Bowers is back, and he is the start of that offense. He is the MVP, make no mistake about it. And TCU struggled, and the movements and the shifts. And that's where Monken is so big, Brandon, because whoever the quarterback is, if you've got personnel that you can't match up with, like Brock Bowers, okay? He mentioned Darnell Washington. Obviously, Darnell's moving on, but Oscar Delp is back. When you're able to put unique skill set guys, specifically Brock Bowers, you've got to have a plan for this guy. And it's impossible because he's Monken's Frankenstein. And he moves them all over the place with shifts and motions. And you've got a plan, but if you don't shift right and you don't end up lined properly, you're screwed. And that's basically what happened. Like TCU tried to stop Brock Bowers. And because they were so focused, they felt like they got out of it. So that's the value of Monken. Now, are there other coordinators and other schemes? Of course. But what Georgia is a combination of a brilliant coordinator who can use his talent to the best of the abilities and use a lot of motions and shifts to make it just an absolute nightmare for defenses. Now, what Carson can do is Carson has an electric arm. Carson had the strongest arm on the team last year. I think you saw that. Now, he's got to work on his touch. We saw some short throws. But the velocity, I think with Carson, what you get, and this is why Ra Thomas becomes very important, you need to have multiple receivers to go multiple sets. And I think if Ra is on the team, and that situation's got to play out so far, he's not dismissed, I think you're going to see more of the offense we saw with JT Daniels, more of a conventional, if there is such a thing in Monken's offense, more of a conventional spread, more multi-receiver sets. Maybe not quite as much double tight end because Darnell Washington was just a freak, and there's not another guy that's 6'8", 285 that can play offensive tackle among this tight end room. There's some talented guys, but I think that's what Carson brings. I think it'll be an electric offense. I think they'll spread the ball. I think you'll see more receiver action, probably a little bit less out of the backs, although I've been told Dejon Edwards catches the ball well, Kendall Milton, but you lose Kenny, who didn't have a drop his whole career. You lose Darnell, but you still got Brock Bowers. And if you got Brock Bowers and Todd Monken, that is the chess master with the ultimate chess piece, Brandon. And I think Beck is the guy that's in position with 3 years under Monken. Now, Vandergrift's sticking around. If Monken's sticking around, Vandergrift's already said he wants to graduate from Georgia in the fall, which means he'll be here through December. So I don't think Vandergrift's going anywhere. But Vandergrift, I think, is more like a Stetson Bennett on steroids. Bigger, stronger, faster, very good leader. You've seen he's got a strong arm, but as a runner, he's not just running out of bounds, okay? He's running over folks. Mm-hmm. Vandergrift is a legit run threat. So that RPO offense, Kirby could sit back with Monken, and who knows? Maybe 3 or 4 games go by. If it's not looking smooth, maybe, hey, let's try a little bit more of that RPO like we ran with Stetson when we made that switch. You wonder a little bit about that, right? And then when I talk to the guys about Gunner, they just say, Chris Smith was sitting right where I'm sitting right now saying, look, Gunner's, this guy's talented. This guy, they saw him all the time with scout team. And Chris said, he's coming. So when I asked Chris, what about next year, right? What do you think? He goes, they can win. I said, so this three-peat? He goes, no, they've got the guys. They've got the guys. I said, but, all 3 of these guys. He was smiling, they've got the guys. The Georgia guys that were here believe that Georgia is going to win another national championship. Wow. They believe that. They
fun.
say, you haven't seen some of these guys that are coming. And they were not at all worried about the quarterback position, Brandon.
That's a really fun topic. Let me finish with this. You're in Mobile, Senior Bowl. You know, there are some people, I'll admit I'm a little bit like this. Like, I'm just not that into like the pre-draft thing. I mean, I obviously like the NFL draft. It's a it's a fun thing to watch. You know, I'm not as involved in like the pre-draft process. I just don't follow that as closely. So for people who are a little bit more like me and just not super into the whole pre-draft thing, give me an idea of kind of, you know, how these – first of all, give me an idea from the Georgia perspective who is there at the Senior Bowl, kind of how they've done here thus far. Just kind of finish with a little bit of an overview of what you're seeing from prospective NFL draft prospects from Georgia there in Mobile.
Well, the real value is you get to see these guys without being censored. They're not worried about what Kirby Smart's going to say. They're not worried about giving away the game plan. So you get to see who these guys really are. And in the last couple of years, the Georgia players are who we think they are. Okay, last year, Devontae Wyatt was here cutting up. This year, Kenny McIntosh, and he's a media darling. He's all over the room. Everybody loves him, the SEC now. Same with Chris Smith, Soldier Chris. Everybody wants to talk to Chris. Everybody wants to talk to Kenny. I talked to Podlesny. I'll tell you, yesterday was fascinating. Warren McClendon, okay? Warren was a part of that tragic car wreck just 2.5 weeks ago. But there was Warren McClendon after practice. I was standing there with Zach Klein from WSB2 and DJ Shockley. And these are two guys that know the program as well as anybody. And Warren was asked, you know, about what are you going through right now? He said, I'm seeing a psychiatrist, you know, and I'm working through it. And then he was asked, what did you remember about the crash? He said, well, actually, I was knocked out. And I mean, Warren McClendon, just grown man stuff, Brandon. 2.5 weeks ago, he was involved in a deadly crash that claimed a teammate. And he is standing in front of the media and he is meeting with all these NFL teams. And every one of those teams is going to ask about the crash. Every one of those teams is going to ask about more than the crash. They're going to get into the other details. We didn't go there. The media is not going to ask about what happened before and where that's not what we're here for. We're here to, you know, highlight these kids and give them a chance to tell their story. Warren is working through this. I talked to Jack Podlesny, who's his roommate down here, and he said, this is what Warren wants to do. This is how he's working through this. He needs to talk about it. He needs to release. Now, obviously, you know, he's not going into all these details, but something happened and he's got to move forward. And Brandon, he is within 3 months of his dream. These guys have worked their entire life to get to the NFL. And Georgia was a huge stop. And yes, they wanted to win championships, but make no mistake about it. At the end of the day, they want to be pros. They want to give their families financial freedom for generational wealth. And this is the dream. And you're within 3 months of it. So these need to be the best 3 months of your life. You need to get in the best shape you've ever been in. You need to do your interviews with all the teams. When you stand up and you talk to the media, you know, you need to answer the questions and represent yourself and your program properly. Everything is being watched. Everything is being scrutinized. These teams are on the verge of investing millions of dollars into you. So you have to be at your best. It is the ultimate job interview. Starts here in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. How you practice, how quickly you pick up the offense. How do you interview with people? How do you interact? What are you like around your teammates? They're scrutinizing all of this. And the practices are just that they're wide open. There's fans in the stands. You're watching these guys go 5-on-5, 7-on-7. You know, got to see Kenny yesterday. Kenny had a little scare. Had a calf cramp up on him. He went down the turf. We thought maybe it was a twisted knee. He goes in the locker room. Everybody's holding their breath. Nope. Talked to his dad today. Said, look, that ain't the way Kenny McIntosh is going out. He's going to be back on the practice field today, and he's going to be showing the NFL who and what he is and how he did it at Georgia. And that's what Chris said, too. I'm going to bring that Georgia standard out there, you know, and yeah, it's different not having all these dogs around you. You know, funny thing about Chris, Brandon, all these other guys are wearing black shorts. Chris is wearing his Georgia football pants. He's got his G on. Everybody's got their helmets on, but he's got Georgia pants. He's like, man, I just ain't wearing those black shorts. I'm wearing my football. So he's still repping the G, not just on the helmet, but with the football pants when he's out there practicing. But dialing it back to Warren, this is important for people to know because I saw on social media, oh, how dare the media ask him these questions? Oh, bloodthirsty. Listen, DJ Shockley understands Georgia football players, and so does Zach Klein. And Warren McClendon made himself available to the media because Warren McClendon understands that what happened, tragic as it is a part of his draft profile. And he has to deal with that. And he has to meet with all the NFL teams. And he has to find a place for that. The draft's not going to wait. He can't postpone it. He can't say, hey, I've had a bad thing happen. Give me another shit. No, it's happening now. And Warren is doing the best that he can to deal with this. I thought the media was very fair and sensitive to that, but at the same time, giving him the opportunity to speak, which, as DJ Shockley told me, and I'll have a story with DJ. DJ reacted to everything. DJ talked about the Stetson stuff. He talked about the stuff going on at Georgia. I'll have that story later. But DJ said, look, Warren needed to get that off his chest and speak. So there's a lot going on here, Brandon. These players are being evaluated every which way but loose. It's a fantastic event because you really see how the NFL works. You see how they practice. You see how they coach them up. And you see these kids at their best. And to watch the Georgia players represent today, I can tell you the way they handled their interviews, the way they spoke about their program. And yes, there's some difficulties right now, but it would make Georgia fans very proud. In fact, I will have video up later on this afternoon on our DawgNation YouTube site of Chris Smith answering a lot of these questions that we talked about today, as well as Kenny McIntosh. And I talked to Tyreek Stevenson, by the way. Wait till you hear what he had to say about the national title game. And I talked to a Missouri guy about that little thing that happened in the end zone before the game. Wait till you – so there's some good stuff coming out of here, man. Just stay tuned. And I know, Brandon, you're going to have all that signing stuff. Signing day is exploding. People excited about Monken. I mean, there's a lot going on right now. I know a lot of folks tuned into DawgNation for it.
Mike, I appreciate that. We'll have to leave it there for today, but we'll look forward to reading all of that from you there at DawgNation.com. Thanks for your time, and we'll enjoy the chance to talk to you again very soon.
All right, thanks, Brandon.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, interesting stuff there on kind of the future of the Georgia program and what former Georgia players are saying in Mobile about that. A couple things here real quick, and then we'll kind of move on and do some of the SEC Through stuff. Like, I think the one thing that's going to make Gunnar Stockton a very interesting part of the quarterback competition at Georgia is the thing that I believe he brings to the table, having seen him play a few times in high school. There's a level of toughness there, and I think it's good to have some toughness in your quarterback competition, which is not to say that Carson Beck, Brock Vandagriff don't have that. They may have their own version of toughness. I'm just saying that one of the things that I've seen from Stockton, like if you're doing, hey, give me kind of a one-word or sort of a one-phrase description of the various quarterbacks, I think, Mike described Vandagriff's athleticism. I do think that Brock is a terrific athlete, and that's probably one of the things that makes him interested in this competition. You talk about the arm for Carson Beck. The best that I can tell is Carson Beck really has that arm talent. That might be, kind of the short caricature style description of him. For me, one of the things that makes Gunnar Stockton interesting is his toughness. I saw him display that in high school. I think it's one of those things that you do want some toughness from your quarterback, which doesn't mean that says that, well, Gunnar's going to be the quarterback because of that. But what I do think it means is that, for Brock Vandagriff or for Carson Beck, in order to be the Georgia starter, they're going to have to match the toughness that a guy like Gunnar Stockton brings to the table. And kind of the same thing of, hey, if Vandagriff's got the athleticism, we certainly saw him move around very well during his high school career. He's obviously got a degree of mobility there. Then the starting quarterback at Georgia is also going to have to kind of match that athleticism. And obviously, one of the names of the game for quarterback is the ability to deliver the football. We know Carson kind of is thought of as doing that. There's a lot of video that comes out of him throwing the ball. He always looks really sharp. Ball spins so tightly, the way that a good pass is supposed to, that the eventual starting quarterback for Georgia's kind of got to be able to match that there as well. That it certainly seems like each player in this competition kind of brings their own spice into the discussion, which I think is going to make it really fun this spring. I'm actually really very excited about that. And I'll just say two other things here real quick. I think the next Kenny McIntosh style running back at Georgia is going to be really important. And no doubt we'll spend a lot of time talking about this, but that's been kind of a through line for Georgia. I would say it sort of started with Sony Michel in the Kirby Smart era, that running back that's also a potent pass catcher, a very athletic style of running back. Sony was that. James Cook kind of became that. Cook was a huge part of, obviously, the 2021 national champion. And then Kenny McIntosh was a big part of what Georgia did here this year. McIntosh is kind of an amazing story because when he was coming out of high school, I don't really think I thought of him as that level of athlete. And I was either wrong about him then, or he just sort of became a much better athlete over the course of his college career. I'm actually not really sure which of those two things is more true. But pretty clearly, McIntosh kind of became what Cook had been, what Sony Michel was before that. And identifying the next versatile pass-catching running back at Georgia is going to be a very, very important part of this upcoming spring. I believe that's true. Another thing I'll mention here is the subject of Oscar Delp also came up too. I'll save this kind of for later. But I think that Delp's one of the most important players in this Georgia team this spring. And on the list of guys who could really break out in a big way for next year, I would say that Oscar Delp is definitely on that list for me as a guy that I just have a lot of enthusiasm about right now. We'll see if it does play out that way. But Oscar could be now big shoes to fill because Darnell Washington's not here anymore. But, man, Oscar could be a really fun player here this fall. With all that said, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Obviously, we're getting excited here. Had a great meeting yesterday about our DawgNation cruise. And the thing that makes a DawgNation cruise fun is that it's extra stuff in addition to what you're already doing on board a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. Because let's face it, we're on Independence of the Seas. There's already a lot of great things associated with being on board Independence of the Seas, especially restaurants, the entertainment options, the live music, obviously the stuff going on at the pool deck, the water slides, things like that. But what makes a DawgNation cruise special is the DawgNation part of this, the special events we do exclusively for those a part of our second ever cruise with DawgNation. So we were having some meetings about that yesterday, and some of the stuff we did last year, we're kind of taking it up to a bigger level this year, kind of plussing it in a lot of ways. And first of all, we have a bigger staff at DawgNation this year than we've had before, so that kind of makes stuff like this fun, kind of new ideas coming into some of these kinds of events. So it's just going to be a great time. I'm really, really excited about that. And so I can't wait to share so much of this with all of you. In fact, we're excited about a lot of things with Royal Caribbean. I got a couple of cruises coming up with the Royal Caribbean here this year. And so this is the portion of the show where I remind you that if you want your own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation to look forward to, you can reach out to the same travel agent that books all of my travel. Her name's Jessica Slater. She was specially selected for us by Royal Caribbean because of her expertise. And I got to tell you, it's been a very satisfactory experience for me, allowing Jessica to help us plan our vacation. So you can give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also visit royaldogs.com, that website, once again, royaldogs.com, and find out about all the great things that Royal Caribbean has going on here this time of year. So interesting stuff going on around the SEC. So let's kind of dive into that here right now, including what certainly appears to be the case that Alabama was turned down for its offensive coordinator job. One of the names that has emerged here as of late is Ryan Grubb. Grubb is the Washington offensive coordinator. Huskies had very good success offensively, and him coming back to Seattle is a pretty big deal because Michael Penix, the quarterback, is coming back there as well. The Pac-12 is actually kind of a fun league for this upcoming year because there are a lot of quarterbacks in place in the league. I don't think it's a national championship contending conference or anything like that, but on a week in, week out basis, they'll probably be playing some pretty entertaining football, and Grubb going back to Washington is a pretty big deal for that league. But around here, we care about the SEC, and Grubb not going to Alabama by appearances is a very big deal. Here's what we know. We know that he interviewed. We know that for a fact, but I believe it's 24/7 Sports that has reported that he was actually extended an offer, and he turned that down. So it's one thing to interview and then go back home and announce, hey, I've decided to stay. Sometimes when that happens, it's more about you realize you're not going to be the guy, and so you get the chance to announce you're staying before the other school announces the hire as a way of kind of saving face. But by appearances, that's not what's gone down here with Alabama. There are, some sort of serious-sounding reports that Grubb was actually offered the job and turned it down. Now, he's going back to Washington for what appears to be the same money that he was already making. But, y'all, Grubb was already making $2 million. He's making a lot of money as Washington offensive coordinator already. So, does that play some sort of factor in all this? I don't know. But it certainly seems like Grubb was offered the job, or at least there's some reporting out there that he was offered the job, and he chose to turn it down, and he chose to stay and Washington not going to Alabama. Then on the other side of this, there's also more chatter about the defensive coordinator position. And one of the things we've talked about is what Jeremy Pruitt's involvement in all this might be, that this is one of those deals where Pruitt's obviously got the connection to Alabama, the connection to Saban in particular. He's not employed. It seems like one of those things that if you feel like you can hire him, if you want to hire him, then he's just sort of there to be hired. Apparently there has been some movement in this regard. Dennis Dodd reporting CBS Sports. I'm going to read just a couple of sentences of this. Dodd writing that Alabama coach Nick Saban has reached out to former Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt regarding the Crimson Tide's vacant defensive coordinator position. It is believed no offer has been made at this time, and Alabama would not speak on Pruitt's candidacy when contracted for comment. Now, this is what Dodd also says here, which I think is kind of interesting, that sources indicate that Pruitt would face long odds of getting hired by the Crimson Tide as the subject of an ongoing NCAA investigation. He was fired at Tennessee 2 years ago as the NCAA leveled allegations of 18 Level 1 violations against the Vol. So this is pretty closely, kind of tied to what we said yesterday. We were mostly just sort of speculating out loud, but the official reporting here kind of backs that up. That if you're going to hire Pruitt, he was just sort of there to be hired. The fact that you haven't hired him yet sort of leads you to believe there's a little bit of friction in this process, and the easy assumption to make is that friction was coming because of the NCAA stuff. I guess there's been some chatter out there that it's not Greg Sankey who's standing in the way of this being done, that it may be, kind of something else to all of this. Obviously, you just want to be careful about, hiring a coach that maybe has a little bit of a sign on his back via the NCAA. But I think you're left to wonder, well, if you've got, a guy like Grubb turning down the offensive coordinator job, Pruitt may be unhireable on the basis of this reporting here by Dennis Dodd, what does that leave for Alabama? We all had kind of a collective chuckle yesterday at the thought of Todd Grantham as Alabama defensive coordinator, but I'm still going to stick by my guns on that. I believe that Grantham is a little bit of a false positive. I believe that Grantham is kind of one of those names that's been floated to make Bama fans feel better about the guy they eventually hire, because surely to goodness Nick Saban can find somebody better than Todd Grantham to run his defense. If he can't, that may tell you all you need to know about the final stages of Saban's coaching life there at Alabama. But I sort of believe that the Grantham thing likely ends up being a smokescreen. But nonetheless, that's all pretty interesting here right now. Something else that's interesting, and in a roundabout way, this is not typical fodder for us here, but I think a lot of this audience will probably be, find this interesting. There's been some reporting out there. Some of you know that Chip Carey, longtime Braves broadcaster, obviously the son of the legendary Skip Carey, the grandson of Harry Carey. Chip Carey recently left the Braves to go be the TV broadcaster for St. Louis Cardinals. St. Louis is his hometown. It's obviously one of the the heritage franchises. Maybe he's just sort of ready for a change after being with Atlanta for a long time. But in some form or fashion, Chip has moved on, and there's now an opening to be the Atlanta Braves television broadcaster. There's always a little bit of curiosity about who steps in to kind of be local broadcaster here for the Braves. And some of the reporting, and I believe this comes from The Athletic, I think Mark Bowman had some of this too, MLB.com, is it sounds like our good friend Tom Hart, who's a regular, makes regular appearances here on our show, a terrific SEC network broadcaster, in addition to college football, does basketball and things like that. It sounds like Tom Hart is among the finalists, one of those guys that has a very good chance of becoming the TV broadcaster for the Braves. A lot of you know that when Hart was a young broadcaster, he was kind of like, I guess you call it sideline reporter. He was a part of Braves TV broadcast many years ago, so got a connection to Atlanta, connection to the Braves in particular, big baseball guy, just in general across the board. So it's easy to understand why he would be attracted to that. He's got a connection here in some respects. I guess I wouldn't have necessarily known if being the local TV broadcaster for the Braves, is that a bigger job than being like the lead college football guy on the SEC network? Is that a bigger job? Maybe it is. Maybe it pays more money because you certainly work more. But I wouldn't have necessarily just automatically have thought, it's a bigger job to be TV broadcaster for the Braves than it is to be a college football broadcaster of the SEC network. Maybe just by virtue of being Major League Baseball, that's what makes it bigger. Or maybe it's just Hart's preference. But one way or another, it sounds like Tom Hart, who, as I said before, we almost always have on the show before he calls the Georgia game. Tom Hart could be calling Atlanta Braves games here very soon, at least in the possibility of all that. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let me also give you a note here, too, on recruiting before we kind of wrap things up. The other name that's out there for Georgia here today via the class of 2023 is the tight end Walker Lyons. Now, you know the story on Lyons. At least many of you are aware of this by now. If he were to sign, I guess technically he would count as a 2023 signee, although in this day and age I'm not even really sure that matters much anymore because there is no more 25-man hard cap or anything like that. But he wouldn't join Georgia if he were to come to Georgia for like a year and a half because he would go on a mission trip with his church. And so one way or another, The Lions story's been out there, a little unorthodox from the standpoint that he might sign somewhere but not show up for another year and a half. Not a full 2 years, the way that some Mormon mission trips have been, but maybe more like a year and a half. I guess Jeff Centellis reported on that. But as we are on National Signing Day here today, I don't think anybody really knows what Lyons is going to do. I joked with our video audience prior to the start of the show that there's an old adage that coaches sometimes share with each other, which when it comes to a recruit making a decision, if you don't know, it isn't you. This may be one of those things where this late in the process, if we don't know for sure Lyons is coming to Georgia, that might mean that he's not coming to Georgia, but that is out there, and I just wanted to kind of make mention of that. Also, one more thing before we wrap up here today. I got a text message from my good friend and partner on high school football broadcast, Rusty Manziel, that exactly 12 years ago today, the number one running back in the country was going to decide between Alabama and Georgia. Of course, many of you remember that was Isaiah Crowell. And Rusty's daughter, Kaylee, calls and says, "Dad, I'm going to sneak my phone into school. Text me at 1:45 while I'm at recess so I know where he goes." I say all of that because over the course of the last couple of weeks, we've been very happy to have Kaylee Mansell a part of our team here at DawgNation now. She's helping us with the show. She's hanging out with us, and obviously it's a big coup for us to steal Kaylee away from her dad. But nonetheless, we're happy to have her here. Were you in fifth grade then? Is that what you were? Fifth grade, taking her phone with her to school to find out where Isaiah Crowell was going to school. That's certainly the kind of person that was sort of born to be a part of all of this. And so we're very happy to have Kaylee with us for what we're doing here at DawgNation, and kind of a fun look back on a signing day memory back when signing day was truly signing day. So that is indeed good stuff. Let me give you a shout out here before we get ready to say goodbye on our show here today. A couple, in fact. On Friday, we always do our big finish, courtesy of our friends at the Finish Long Drink. And we'd love for you to be a part of that. And by the way, if you've not tried the Finish Long Drink, this is a great time to do that too. Go to thelongdrink.com and you can put in your zip code. You can find out where you can pick some up. A lot of folks kind of back at golf courses and things like that. Again, well, it's available at golf courses all around where I live. Bars, restaurants, beverage stores, everything else in between. Great chance to try the Finish Long Drink. There's 4 different varieties. There's the traditional, the blue can. Got the citrus flavor, the gin kick to go along with that. Get the Long Drink Cranberry, Long Drink Strong, that's 8.5% alcohol by volume. Long Drink Zero, that's no carbs, no sugar. It comes in a can, so it sort of looks like a beer, but it's not. It is a ready-to-drink cocktail. You like mixed drinks? Well, this is like a mixed drink in a can. Just pop the top, drink it, or pour it into a glass. Whatever you want to do, it goes great on all of that. If you're not sure which of those long drink varieties you think you might like, you can actually get the 8-can variety pack, which comes with 2 different cans of each of the 4 long drink varieties. So a great chance to try some Finish Long Drink. Go to thelongdrink.com to find out more about that, and maybe we'll feature you this Friday when we do our big finish, courtesy of the Finish Long Drink. Also, shout out to our friends at MyBookie there as well, because this is a great time to get involved with our friends at MyBookie. I was thinking about this, that we're kind of deep into the heart of college basketball season right now. Georgia's at Auburn tonight after getting their win against South Carolina over the weekend, breaking a long multi-year losing streak to the Gamecocks. So we're kind of in the midst of all of this right now. Tennessee, Alabama, national championship contenders, certainly Final Four contenders at the very least. So, we're kind of passing that time. We got one more football game left. That's the Super Bowl coming up in a couple of weeks. The point is this is a great time to sign up for an account at MyBookie if you haven't done that yet, because it kind of helps pass the time before we're talking about college football again. G-Day coming up on April 15th, and you're just kind of getting back into that college football vibe, but passing that time right now by getting some action down. Daytona 500's coming up. That's kind of a fun thing to get some bets down on. PGA Tour stuff there as well. All kinds of opportunities to take advantage of what we call winning season there at MyBookie. So do this. Use the internet. Let the browser do the work for you. Just type in MyBookie. They'll find the website. When you get to MyBookie, use the promo code DawgNation, and then take advantage of the big deposit bonus that MyBookie's famous for. You put in $400, they're going to give you into your account $400 there as well. You've got like $800 in your account before you even win your first bet. They'll do that for you all the way up to $1,000. And all you got to do is sort of play that money through once, and then after that, you're kind of just in business, and you're a big winner there with our friends. At least you have a chance to be a big winner with our friends at MyBookie. So take advantage of all that. They make the process very simple. You play, you win, you get paid. That's one of the things that's allowed MyBookie to be really a market leader in this space for such a long time, is how streamlined this process is. It's not complicated. It's not hard. It's just fun. So open the account with MyBookie, get the big deposit bonus up to $1,000, and then take advantage of winning season with MyBookie today. All right, so I'm always amazed by two things about our audience. We have people in our audience that are very, very talented, and they also just live sort of fancier lives than I live. Like, I live a very simple life, I guess, in some respects. And I'm always amazed by how fancy some of the people in our audience are, and B, how talented many of them are there as well. In fact, that is the subject of today's golden shoe here, because one of our audience members, who goes by UGA Nation 412 on Twitter, says that I made a custom charcuterie board. First of all, I can barely even pronounce charcuterie, and I don't believe I could spell it without having spotted a good number of letters. But nonetheless, UGA Nation says, custom charcuterie board I did for a friend of mine, wanted Georgia Bulldog custom colors. How nice is this? Very, very impressed by the talent of our audience. It is customized Georgia colors. But I'm also just sort of fascinated by people who are like, hey, I need a charcuterie board. Like, I don't really know that I've ever thought, boy, you know what I'm missing right now is a charcuterie board. But nonetheless, we'll give out a golden shoe there for that to all the fancy folks in our audience. And we'll remind you, those lousy stinking Gators, they have no charcuterie boards. They're just simply eating cold cuts off the floor. That's all they got down there in Gator country. And 269 days from right now, they got more bad news coming their way, because another beat down at the hand of the back-to-back Dog National Champions. Go for 2 in 22. Eyes on 2023. Beating up Florida on the way. You better believe we're excited about all that. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Breda Pest Management. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down for all of you charcuterie consumers out there and everything else in between, woodworking experts and whatnot. We're glad to have you here. We'll take your comments about really whatever you want to talk about, and we'll probably bounce out of here. I don't know. We'll try to do a good number of comments, but let's see. Let's just see how it goes. I will go to DawgNation.com to begin here today. Monkster says it looks like an enforcement paddle. I've been hit by a few of those. So I was thinking the other day, I am precisely this many years old. When I was in kindergarten, they had this thing called the woodshed in my school, and if you got in trouble, you had to go to the woodshed, and the principal paddled you. I remember being in the first grade, and they'd take you out in the hallway. And I remember, as a kid, this is the most scandalous thing that could happen. It's the kid gets in trouble, and really and truly, I didn't really get. I was kind of a quiet, shy kid in elementary school, so I never really got in trouble at all. But the kid would do something, get in trouble, have to go out in the hallway, and you'd just be sitting there, and pretty soon you hear smack. They used to beat kids in school, in my lifetime. I guess that stopped around probably when I was in the second grade, but kindergarten, first grade, I remember, kids get paddled. I remember that for sure. Weston checks in to say, I listen to your show every day. Thank you so much, Weston. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. It means the world to me. It really does. We try to be here every day, and we love it when folks do stop by and hang out with us. And so, Weston, I'm very happy to have you as a part of our audience. Thank you very much. By the way, do you guys think, is being Braves TV broadcaster better than being number one? I'm getting thumbs up from Michael and Kaylee there. I guess maybe it is. I guess it probably pays more money because it is Major League Baseball. And the Braves are obviously a really big broadcast. But you think about Tom probably ranks, if you say that Brad Nessler has had the CBS spot, that's probably number one. Tom is probably somewhere around it's a little bit hard to do this the way you do in the NFL because you're kind of doing it across multiple networks, at least right now. But Tom's somewhere around probably number 3 SEC broadcaster. I'm not even really sure who the consistent number 2 is because this kind of stuff moves around so much. But if you think about, your CBS 330 is your number 1 spot. And usually you've got an ESPN game that usually gets the number 2 draft spot for the SEC. Who typically does those games? Is that Sean McDonough that's typically that number 2 guy there in that spot? Maybe it's a rotating cast. But then you've got that Saturday night SEC network game that's about your number 3 broadcast, right? And that's the one that Tom's on. So I mean, I think he's a fairly young guy. So if he's there in that spot, then you got to think he's maybe moving his way up. Now, I guess he may say, well, I'm just going to try to do both jobs. And obviously, we live in a day and age when Kirk Herbstreit's got 57 jobs. So maybe Tom could do both jobs. And maybe that's what it is. But he's also doing, like, basketball and stuff like that, too. Maybe we'll have him on the show and just ask him, like, what his plans are. But nonetheless. Oh, yeah, so Todd Monken is on Twitter. But he ain't tweeting that much because he's only got 23,000 followers. But yeah, he is on Twitter. So pardon me, Todd. There you go. Yes, I will follow you. I'll be honest, I don't follow tons of coaches because they tweet a lot of nonsense. It's a lot of like retweet fluff, which is, listen, that's all part of the job. Don't get me wrong. But I don't follow tons of coaches because I don't find it all that valuable for the timeline necessarily. But I apologize. So the last thing, so he retweeted something on January 31st. So yeah, he's active enough. He's active enough. So pardon me. I apologize for that. So there you go. Ron Scroggy, 85 alumnus, says, listening to you in retirement from our home in, let me see if I can pronounce this. Is it Edisto Island, South Carolina? Edisto, is that how you say that? It sounds like it's an awesome place, though. That's fantastic. Lee B says, Braves better be paying their broadcasters top dollar, considering they never go after top dollar free agents. So there you go. Maybe the money that Alex Anthopoulos is saving when it comes to the free agent pool, maybe they're using them the broadcasters. Although, in fairness, the Braves do spend a lot of money re-signing their own players. So to be fair there with that. Joe Garliardi says, if Duce signs with UGA, we're going to be Robinson, you at that point. Yeah, this is one of those things that as I get a little older, the number of Georgia players who have similar sounding names gets really challenging for me. It is really weird how, like, I'll be in the midst of talking because, we kind of work without a net around here. We don't have a lot of scripting or anything like that. I'm just sort of blabbing most days. It's kind of amazing how possible it is for me. I can forget in a moment's notice anybody's name, like my children's names, like famous people's names. Like in a moment, I can be talking, and not my children's name, but you get the point. Like, I mean, names can just disappear out of my brain, and they are not there, and nothing sounds right. I mean, there are some moments in which it goes, and it is not inside my head who so and so's name might be. So a lot of very similar sounding Georgia player names is a real problem. It's a real problem. Okay, so Jeff says it's actually pronounced Eddie's toe. Eddie, is that right? Or are you just pulling my leg? No, Ron says the same thing. Yeah, Edisto. There you go. I think I'm saying that right. But that sounds like a great place either way, though. Senior Dog 54, I remember our shop teacher paddled the whole class one day. I guess he probably had a 2x4 to do it with, too. He says, all boys, no one told their parents, just the way it was. Yeah, that is true. And, shop class has kind of always been kind of one of the, like, shop class has sort of always been sort of the Wild West of high school as it is. So no doubt how true that probably is. Arizona Dog says, if the Dogs don't get Duce, Robinson, or Lyons, is the tight end room in trouble now? I guess they're probably still a good ways away from being in trouble because they'll still have Brock Bowers, Oscar Dell, Lawson Lucky coming in, Pierce Sperlin coming in. I think that Duce is just a really special player. The Walker Lyons thing, I don't know as much about him as a player, to be honest with you, completely. I mean, I know who he is, but I don't have as much familiarity with his game. But maybe you being AZ Dog, I'm assuming that stands for Arizona, maybe you can be our inside correspondent there on the Duce Robinson situation. Dan in Arkansas says, is there hope for Ra-Ra? I don't know. I don't know that situation particularly well, but I guess the longer it goes without hearing anything, the more you might be led to believe that he's still on the team. Paul Moon also reminds that in addition to all the tight ends on the Georgia roster, you've also got a very impressive 2024 commit in Landon Thomas from down in Colquitt County there as well. That is indeed true. Let's see what else. Yeah, Timon says, say it fast. Edisto. So I am saying that right. Edisto. Frank Patterson says, did you see where UGA gave a preferred walk-on to an offensive lineman, 6'5", 315 pounds? I did not see that, but that's certainly very impressive. Or maybe I did see it. Because I guess I did see something. It all kinds of runs together. I will say, though, that to me, one of the most impressive things about Georgia is I think that Kirby Smart has kind of taught us all that everything matters, that if you're building a great program, it all matters. Everything matters. And Georgia is very serious about its preferred walk-on program. I mean, very serious. Some of these guys can really play. They all provide a great level of depth. And, I mean, Georgia is just as serious about that aspect of the program as they are the guys that get the scholarship offers. They're very judicious in who they extend those preferred walk-on offers to. And these are guys that have a chance to play. In some cases, these are guys that do play. I mean, like Dan Jackson has proven to be a pretty valuable, piece for Georgia. So yeah, that's good stuff. Let's see what else. Crow King 123 on Glenn Schumann's future, maybe sticking around when a head coaching job comes available. I could see that being the case. Keep in mind that Schumann is really young. Like, he's very young. So, I mean, if he is waiting to be a head coach, that's one of those things where, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess, we see younger and younger guys getting, job offers. Obviously, Lanning was pretty young in his own right. But, I mean, Glenn Schumann's still really young. Let's see what else. Randy Payne says, I retired my second job yesterday. Got more time to listen to Dog Nation. Go Dogs from Tifton, Georgia. Go for 3 and 23. Randy, congratulations. That is awesome to hear. Jay Shep said I unfollowed him to avoid my direct messages. So my problem is I'm not super active. Like I don't really follow that many people because, and that's not, I just not, like I pop on Twitter for a few minutes and then pop off and then I'll kind of pop on. Like I'm not the most like active social media person out there. For instance, when it comes to like Facebook and things like that, I'm basically only on Facebook to do the show. I don't spend a lot of time on a lot of these social platforms other than just kind of what I do for work. I mean, a lot of you who may follow me on Twitter, you'll see, like, I'll go days without, tweeting anything, and then I may kind of pop on and tweet something and sort of pop back off after that. Jimbo Slice Bread, which is a funny username, kind of giving some grief to Sean McDonough. I know that McDonough's voice kind of cracks a little bit, but I think that McDonough's a good play-by-play man. I remember when he was kind of prior to Vern Lundquist. I remember years ago when Sean McDonough was the CBS play-by-play man. I always thought he was pretty good. I don't think he was in a great fit in the Monday night job for whatever reason, but I think that McDonough's a pretty good play-by-play man. B2B Visor says my high school basketball coach yoked me for being smart. Like my mom said I deserved it. I kept my mouth shut the rest of the semester. Yeah, I think a lot of us have stories similar to that. Larry Dern says he received 5 paddlings during his senior year. I mean, if you're paddling a high school senior, at this point in time, you're sort of getting into like the Singapore caning thing, right? I mean, like if you're paddling a senior, I mean, you're essentially – that's basically an adult. I mean, that's getting into like, the Singapore thing. Let's see what else. Jimbo Sliced Bread also wants one of those UGA championship belts. Yeah, I do like those. I love those. I mean, you have a lot of these companies now that kind of make those like customized wrestling belts. They're kind of expensive, but man, what a cool thing. John Main says, B.A. lives a simple life, which I said a minute ago, but he's on a cruise every other month. First of all, I'm not on a cruise every other month, but I just don't know how to make charcuterie boards or even – like I'm not even 100% sure what charcuterie even is. I mean, I think it's like cold cuts and cheese and stuff like that. It's like – it's basically the sandwich without the bread, right? That's kind of what charcuterie is. But that is funny. Let's see what else. The folks kind of checking in, talking about Dougherty County and Worth County and some great part of the state down there. Pizza Man asked if Duce would be able to play baseball at Georgia as well. So I mean, he's certainly been offered a scholarship by Georgia baseball, and I'm sure that they would be, as accommodating for him as possible. But I do take the Jake Fromm on this thing really seriously, the audio we played off the top of the show, which is, even if you want to play baseball, if you're going to try to be the best you can be at Georgia, meaning, fully committed during the offseason and everything else, it's just going to be hard to do it. It's just going to be really hard to do. And, listen, I'm sure there are a lot of programs that will just, let him do whatever he wants. And I'm not saying that Georgia wouldn't let him play baseball. And listen, maybe he really is just the next great thing in baseball. I'm always pretty suspicious of these claims of, well, so-and-so's just as good at baseball as he is in football. Most people aren't really, really good at two different things. They're just not. That's just not how life typically works. Maybe Duce Robinson's one of the rare exceptions because of how athletic he is. It's certainly a possibility. But while, I think that Georgia would be willing to let him give it a shot, I also think it's not an easy thing to do. But he may just be the kind of special athlete that could really do both. Let's see what else is going on. Pizza Man asking the over-under on how many natties Kirby's going to win. I mean, I think you have to wonder. I mean, we're going to talk about this at some point in time. I have this kind of pencil in for, some future show. I think when you look at how the sport's going to change when it becomes an expanded playoff, that's where things, I think, get really interesting. Because when you look at the FCS playoffs, which has been expanded for a long time, much larger than our playoff has been here at the FBS level. When you look at that FCS playoff, you see a lot of the same teams, or at least one team winning an awful lot. So it could get pretty interesting here for Georgia here pretty soon. Let's see what else. Paul Moon says it's not easy, but it may be easier to play two sports when you're not the quarterback. Could very well be the case. Because I don't even think we even go after quarterbacks who want to play both in college. Yeah, Georgia was never much of a factor, for instance, in, say, Dylan Lonergan's recruiting. And Lonergan's kind of a two-sport guy, baseball and football. I just don't think that's what Georgia wants. And like the other day I saw Mike Matthews, who I think that Matthews may be, pound for pound, the most exciting player in Georgia for the class of 2024. With all due respect to like a KJ Bolden or somebody like that, Matthews may be the most exciting player of them all. He's a very good basketball player too. And I saw where Auburn kind of offered like the dual sport offer, football and basketball. And for some prospects, that's the way you get in the door. You kind of pay deference to their multi-sport abilities as a way of kind of making a little bit more of a unique recruiting pitch. I said during the show today that what Georgia has is a program, and a program is bigger than any one coach, kind of bigger than any one player. And the way that you keep a program is you kind of go after guys who are willing to commit themselves to the program, which means there are some players that you're not going to do as well with because, hey, they're only partially bought into what you're doing because they're also kind of partially bought into this thing over here. And at a place like Georgia, it is very hard to have one foot in. It just is. It's very hard to have one foot in. And that's not to say that it can't be done, but it is hard to do. Hard to do. Let's see what else. Reggie Fly says, am I still mad about A.D. Mitchell? The truth is I'm not that mad about it. I mean, it's just one of those things. I'm not that mad about A.D. Mitchell. The only thing I've said about A.D. Mitchell is that, listen, I'm grateful for what he gave to Georgia, 2 national championships. He's a big part of those, certainly the postseason run for Georgia for sure. Like, I'm not going to root for him over at Texas, though. I'm not going to do that. But I'm not mad at him, though. He can, listen, he comes back to Georgia 20 years from now as part of one of these reunion teams, I'll stand up and give him an ovation. I will. I'm not going to, fall all over myself to say, hey, go be great at Texas. I'm not really sure, greatness is even a possibility at Texas, but nonetheless. Alan Verbanchik says, the Tom Brady's scared of Todd Monken's work ethic, that Brady retires because Todd Monken was going to push him. I like that. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's interesting stuff. Wayne Kirkland says the step on the field ready to go Bo Jacksons are rare. Yeah, that's the point. Is that when you start, referencing the two sports stars, when you're mentioning like Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson, you're talking about like the top shelf of athletes anywhere. And it's just kind of hard to be that. Now, I'll tell you this. I mean, both Deion and Bo gave it a real effort. I would say that Bo is a better baseball player than Deion was, but Deion was really good in like the 92 World Series. Braves didn't win the World Series, but Deion was a big part of the Braves story. Then, like, I would say the best of Deion as a baseball player may have been like 92 World Series. He's a pretty valuable player for the Braves at that time, but he played Yankees, Braves, played for the Reds. He played Major League Baseball for a good while. But Bo Jackson was, I would say, he was obviously a great football player. If not for the hip injury, would have had a terrific NFL career. But he was a legitimately very good baseball player, like an all-star level major league player. I don't know that Deion ever made an all-star game. I don't think he did. Maybe he did. I don't think he did. But Bo Jackson was like an all-star level player. I remember that, what was it, the 89 all-star game? Leadoff home run off Rick Russell. Boom! It was fantastic. Now, somebody else to be mentioned in this discussion is Brian Jordan. Now, Jordan didn't play both sports at the same time, but Brian Jordan had a pretty full career for the Atlanta Falcons. He switched over and became a good player for the Cardinals, eventually became an important player for the Braves. What do you have, 2 different stints here in Atlanta? I think it's a player. So Brian Jordan had a career in both sports, but I think he did them. I don't think he ever played both at the same time, I don't think. Yeah, Pete Williams also mentioned Brian Jordan there as well. Pete, am I right about that Jordan stopped playing football to start playing baseball? He did not play both sports at the same time, right? David Faulkner says that Ron Reed was the best two-sport athlete. I don't know Ron Reed. You have to tell me more about him. I don't know about him. Joel Moody says Deion hit .533 in the 92 World Series. Joel, that's amazing. I did not remember that. That's great. That's very good. Jonathan Aaron says, if I was Monken, I'd come back and win a 3rd straight national title. Then I could have a chance to be a head coach in the NFL. And then if Beck is that good, you can take him to your team. He knows the system. Yeah, maybe that's as simple as that. Maybe it's as simple as that for sure. Philip Jordan Wells says we can also, to quote Aaron Rodgers, RELAX about the idea of Monken leaving. Yeah, it seems like, Baltimore is on the verge of losing Lamar Jackson, as Philip kind of points out here. Obviously, Tampa has no quarterback. Is the Eric Bieniemy thing real? First of all, I didn't even know you could make lateral moves in the NFL. I thought they were contractually obligated, contractually prohibited from making lateral moves. Can you do that? Is it really true that Bieniemy's considering going to Baltimore to be their offensive coordinator? Let's see what else. Philip Jordan Wells says that switches sting. Yeah, I didn't get a ton of whippings when I was a kid, but like the old adage about switches was, and I remember people said this back in the day, which is, your parents would tell you to go out and pick a switch, and the dumbest thing to do was to pick the little one, because the little one, just had more torque. It just moved a little faster, and it's one of those things you think you're being smart, you're going to pick the little thin, branch to be what they call the switch. You get hit with a switch. And the little ones were it's almost like a whip. But I didn't get a ton of spankings like that. I think I was actually probably a pretty good kid. Kind of a punk as I got older, but probably a pretty good kid. Let's see what else. Yeah, so Keith Folds, Philip Jordan Wells talking about this. Mama made me go get my own switch for her to use on me. Yeah, I'm telling you, you come back with that little one, that thing's gonna be moving fast. Oh, they also said that your mom would get mad if you came back with one that's too small. That's true, but those long thin ones were actually way more painful than you maybe realize. So Ken Holcomb says that Ron Reed played pro basketball as well as pitched for the Braves in the 60s and 70s. He was 6'9". That's really cool. Thank you, Kent, for sharing that. I appreciate that. Jonathan Aaron also mentioning Sean Payton going back to Denver or I should say going to Denver as head coach. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Peyton's, but I have to admit I think he's probably a pretty good coach, and I would imagine for Denver that's probably a pretty good hire. However, the weird thing about this, and I only like halfway follow this stuff in the NFL level, but they traded a bunch of draft picks to get Russell Wilson, and now they're trading a bunch of draft capital to get Sean Payton. So it's almost like, well, you may be a good coach, but you have very little to work with just because they don't have any draft picks. So, and obviously the Wilson move does not look particularly strong right now. So I think that Payton's probably a pretty good hire. Would I rather have Sean Payton or Jim Harbaugh as my coach? I mean, I think that Harbaugh is actually a pretty good NFL coach too. So I think either way you probably would have been okay. But the issue here is, would I rather have Sean Payton knowing it cost me draft picks or Jim Harbaugh without having to pay all that? I think I probably would have just chosen Harbaugh in that particular case. All right, final comments. We're going to get ready to go. Back on YouTube for a moment. Let's see what else. Paul Moon, the subject of Glenn Schumann getting more time. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where, I mean, obviously, you know, Georgia's had a lot of young coaching prospects, but coaching is still one of those things where it also benefits the coach to get experience. I mean, clearly you want a big job, big promotion, get the big salary that comes with that, but you also want to succeed when you get there because you have a chance to just make a lot more money over the course of the long haul. And so for a lot of these young coaches at Georgia, guys like Hartley, guys like Schumann, others that Trey Scott that we think, could be really moving up the coaching boards here in the years to come. Just getting that little bit more experience just makes it more likely that you succeed once you get there. All right, let's see what else is going on here. Couple final comments before we say goodbye. Andrew Hughes says, I'm all about loyalty over royalty, which is kind of a good line. But, I will say that, I am not that big into loyalty necessarily, and I'll give you an example. So let's say that Todd Monken is only here to do a job, as I kind of joke with Mike about it. He never quite gives you that sort of teary-eyed answer of, oh, my gosh, I've never been happier than I was at Georgia. So let's say that Monken just doesn't have that kind of emotional feel, that this was a job, pays him well, he feels like he could succeed at it, he has succeeded at it. Let's say that's all this is. It's just that's all this is to him. Would anybody say that we've been poorly served by Monken if that's the only way that he feels, that he's here for a short term? He's here. He's, as the saying goes, he's here for a reason. He's not here for a season. That if he's just sort of here to do a job for a little while and then kind of move on after that, I mean, isn't that kind of fine? And you may have a guy like, say, Glenn Schumann, who maybe he sticks at Georgia for a really long time because of this closeness with Kirby Smart, and then eventually he does what Kirby did, which is go on to be a head coach somewhere. But for a lot of the other Georgia assistant coaches, they're about that upward mobility. They're about taking that step to get that next big job, and if that's what happens, then for the most part, hasn't Georgia gotten good use out of them while they've been here? And for the players themselves, I mean, most of the players that come to Georgia now don't really think of Georgia as much more than about a 3-year proposition, that they come here, they look to see, hey, is Georgia going to do right by me? Are they going to play me? And if I can do well here, I'm going to look to bounce onto the NFL as quickly as I possibly can. But that also creates more opportunities for other players too. In other words, I like loyalty in my own life. I certainly hope my family and friends are loyal to me. But when it comes to professional stuff, sometimes it really is just about coming together for a short period of time to do a job together, and then people kind of move on, go on their separate ways because they do have just different ambitions than that. And I would say I'm sort of okay with that for the most part. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but the kind of coach that would pledge loyalty to you is oftentimes not the kind of coach that you want a long-term relationship with. It just sort of works out that way. Jonathan Aaron, yes, there is a very good chance we're back on video before the day is done. And if I keep talking, then we'll just roll right into it. But yes, there is a very good chance we are back on video before we are concluding today's show. All right, final comments over here at DawgNation.com. Go for 3 and he says, ask about who's the kicker going to be for next year. Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, Podlesny has kind of very, very quietly given you very little to worry about at that spot now for a number of years. So the next kicker at Georgia is going to be a very big deal for sure. All right, let's see what else. Question also comes up about the running back with the most carries next season. I guess my bet on that might be Kendall Milton right now, but I think it remains to be seen. Randy Hall noticing the desk a little cleaner than normal. Yeah, so we've had a couple people in the studio here as of late, so I've been taking some stuff off the desk. When I put it back on today, I just sort of put Eddie back on here for whatever reason. All right, we got to go for now. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate that. Let me just say goodbye to Facebook folks one final time over there. Kent Holcomb says, I hope that Monken stays, but if he does, then I'll include him in the DGD category, which is obviously a very hot debate. But for me, I think it's pretty clear that Monken is a DGD. Whether he wants to be one or not, whether he even knows what that is or not, I would say that Monken definitely is. I think that's right. Keith Fold says that Milton and Robinson in the backfield next year could be a lot of fun for sure. So, hey, fun show. Thanks for being here. Y'all check out the AJC online, ajc.com. Kind of a wild story out there. Do y'all have coyotes? Seems like there's a lot of coyotes lately. And there's a story in the AJC about that today. In fact, I want to give you some of this. So lots of maybe even like what's being called aggressive coyotes. So you want a little bit more examination about what's going on with the coyote situation. AJC.com for that. And as you saw on the screen there a moment ago, also AJC.com/dogsnews. If you want one of those beautiful framed field editions celebrating the perfect season for the dogs, or as many of you have been kind enough to purchase the Glory book that I'm kind of in with my kind of epilogue column there at the end of that book. I appreciate that there too. AJC.com/dogsnews to get all of that. Once again, AJC.com/dogsnews for all of that. Also, our friends at R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that today. If your water heater goes out, you don't want a cold shower. You want to be, comfortable and clean in the shower. In many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace that water heater for you the same day. So find them online at rsandrews.com for more on that. We appreciate R.S. Andrews making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible each and every day. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow for DawgNation Daily presented by Breda Pest Management. Who knows? Maybe back on video again today if the news warrants it. We'll talk to you then, everybody.